What's up YouTube? Welcome back to Track Talk. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at Witt Lowry's album, If You Don't Like the Story, Write Your Own. If You Don't Like the Story, Write Your Own is Witt Lowry's fourth studio album, released in 2022, and is 16 songs in length. Jumping in, I want to start off by going over a few of the songs that I actually really liked, and a couple of the songs that I wasn't as big of a fan of to start. Starting with the first song, the intro, Doesn't Feel the Same. I really like this song. It was a little bit messy at parts for me, where Witt is kind of just getting all this stuff off his chest that he's going to be talking about in this album. Like I mentioned, is messy at parts, but overall I think the rapping and I think Witt does a good enough job to kind of just throw it all out there in a way that does end up kind of working in a messy way, which sometimes too many things in one song can kind of overload and be overwhelming, but I actually think Witt executes it pretty well in this song. And then jumping into my favorite song on the album, actually, the song Hometown. I think this is a beautiful song where Witt is talking about how his hometown is changing right in front of his face, even when he sometimes can't even see it. Witt's talking about how there's so many things that he can't even recognize anymore, and throughout the song he's going through all these examples in his own personal life that how these things such as his family are changing in front of his face, and to him it seems like there's nothing he can do about it. Something else Witt actually talks about on this song is how, like I mentioned, how his family and how his hometown is changing. He's also mentioning that he himself is changing, which I think is pretty cool, because I think a lot of people have that experience where you're going through changes, and it can be a good change, it can be a bad change, and we all kind of have a different reflection and different response to that with our own actions. I also really like the chorus on the song. I thought it was a very catchy chorus, and Witt's typically known for having these good catchy choruses, so I wasn't super surprised to see multiple songs on this album with good choruses. Next we have the song Weak. I thought it was kind of an interesting song because Witt's talking about this girl that he actually mentioned in the previous song. In this song he's talking about her more as about her being with someone else, which I thought was really cool because it's kind of him trying to get this closure from this past relationship, which I think is a very good theme on its own. And we'll talk a little bit more later how this theme is kind of reoccurring and does become a little bit repetitive in this album, which is something I wasn't a huge fan of, but on its own this song is a very good song for me. I think it's obviously very relatable as well to a lot of people getting over a relationship or from a past relationship, kind of getting this closure that we all need. And then the final song that I really liked on this album was actually the final song, If You Don't Like the Story, Write Your Own, title song of the album. I thought it was a very beautiful conclusion of Witt kind of wrapping up all these things that he had been talking about in the album, such as love, such as materialism, and the beat on this song is absolutely amazing. It was definitely my favorite beat on the album. The build up throughout the entire song just made that ending so much more intense and so much more satisfying to hear, and so I thought it was a very good kind of conclusion to wrap up the album from Witt. A couple of other songs I want to mention are Nights Like This, which was actually a bit of a slower track and a bit of a slower song, which for Witt is a little bit unusual. He's typically more known for his fast and aggressive style beats. I actually think it was a really nice change of pace for Witt, being that, like I mentioned, he typically is on these fast, more aggressive type style tracks and beats. So I think it was a nice switch up for him. And lastly, the song Tiny Shiny Objects was one of my least favorite songs on the album. I was just not a fan of this beat. It seemed kind of rushed or just not complete. It was kind of tacky, maybe is a word you could use, or kind of not lazy, because I know it took time to make that song, I'm sure, but definitely was not my favorite beat on the album. And Witt's talking about these pretty cliche topics on this song, such as how awards and things you own don't define who you are, which, like I mentioned, isn't necessarily a bad thing on its own, but when it kind of becomes repetitive throughout the album. Going over some of the pros on this album as a whole, I thought there was a lot of really good rapping from Witt throughout the album, especially in those songs I mentioned earlier. And I think there were some really good themes, like I also mentioned earlier, individually on songs. And I think Witt talks about some pretty real and deep stuff in his own life that's also relatable to a lot of people, which I really like when rappers do that. They kind of make that connection between themselves and their listeners. I think their music's a really good way to connect with their audience in a sense of what they might be going through in their own world. Going into some of the cons on this album for me, I think it was a little bit repetitive with the style. I think a lot of the tracks almost sounded the same, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but when you look at an album in its entirety, I usually like to have some more diversity and some more mixing in there. So I wish there was more of that. I think there was some of it. I just think there were some parts that were a little bit repetitive. In the same topic about being repetitive, I thought some of the themes on this album were a little bit repetitive. The biggest one that stood out to me was where Witt is talking about these women in his past relationships. Like I said, I think it's a really good theme individually on certain tracks that can be sprinkled in, but I think this theme was overused throughout the album, and I think it just kind of deteriorates the value and the meaning and the importance of that theme if it's just used over and over again. And I think it causes the structure of an album, which is a very important part of kind of telling a story or kind of what the artist is trying to get off their chest, which Witt is obviously trying to do here. I think it just weakens the structure of that when you have these constantly repeating themes throughout the album. And another thing that isn't necessarily a pro or con, there were a lot of corny bars in the album, which surprisingly I actually don't mind, but there seemed to be quite a few. And I think once again this repetition of kind of seeing the same things and hearing the same sounds became a little bit repetitive. So after the first few, they became a little less enjoyable to me, but I wouldn't necessarily knock the album for that, because maybe that's just Witt's way of adding some humor, if you will, into an album that talks about some pretty deep and real stuff. In conclusion, I think Witt chose a lot of flashes on this album. I think there's, like I mentioned, a handful of songs that are excellent on their own, such as Hometown and If You Don't Like the Story, Write Your Own, which I think are two of Witt's best songs in a whole. I think his rap style really flows well in these songs and, really shows the potential that Witt has, but I also think Witt chose a lot of these flaws throughout the album that we mentioned that I think knocked the album down a little bit for me as a whole. I gave this album a 7.6 out of 10. Like I said, I think there were a handful of songs that I thought were considered great or excellent. I just think there were too many songs, in particular through the middle part of the album, that kind of left me wanting more out of them. I think they were kind of below the expectation I had from this album, especially with going in knowing there were a handful of tracks that I knew were going to be 9s and 10s for me. I think it will be interesting to see if Witt will drop another album again, being that it's been over 3 years since this album was released. So I think it'd be interesting to see if Witt will be releasing anything else soon, or if this is going to be the final thing. Like I said, I think he has a lot of potential. I think there's a lot to like about Witt. When Witt flows on a beat with the style that he has and is capable of, he can make great music. I just also think there's a lot that he can work on, so I would be hopeful that he would drop another album, and if he does, we'll be sure to take a listen to it. Thank you all for watching. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this album. Did you like it? Did you not enjoy it? What were some of your favorite songs? Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe to see more, and we'll catch you on the next video. Peace out.